tonight, the almighty row about tax after last night's TV leaders' debate will separate the fact from the spin. It all comes as Sunak and Starmer agreed to take part in another big TV event, a leaders' special, here on Sky News next week. Well, the Labour leader is furious about Sunak's claim on TV last night that everyone's taxes will go up by £2,000, accusing him of repeatedly lying. But are both parties being totally upfront about their tax plans? Our economics editor Ed Conway will be here to check. And I'll also be joined by the Treasury Minister Bim Afellami to ask if the Prime Minister is lying. The other developing story tonight will be live in Cardiff for the latest as Wales's First Minister Vaughan Gething loses a confidence vote. And I'll be speaking live to the chef Tom Kerridge, who signed a business leaders letter backing Labour, calling it the party of change. Also kicking up some chat and debate for us tonight, Nick Ferrari and Jim Murphy, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Sophy Rodge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, first tonight, I want to bring you the news announced this evening of a Sky News leaders event called the Battle for Number 10, which is going to take place next Wednesday, the 12th of June. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer have both agreed to take part and travel to our election target town of Grimsby. They'll both get to pitch to voters in an in-depth interview before answering questions from an audience. Well, Sky's national correspondent Tom Parmenter joins us now from Grimsby. Tom, what's happening?
Well, this time next week, Sophie, it will all be happening right here in Grimsby on the Lincolnshire coast. A major moment in the election campaign as the two men duelling to become Prime Minister, as we saw them clashing in Salford last night. In Grimsby, this time next week, they will again be speaking to the audience, speaking to the nation about their plans, their priorities and their promises. And there will be real scrutiny from the people of this place. This is one of our target towns on Sky News. Both Grimsby and neighbouring Cleethorpes are forming this new constituency, which will be of vital significance. Both the Conservatives and Labour will be desperate to try and win it, and it will be a key indicator of just which way the country is going. We've been here throughout the course of the year, listening to what people have made of what's going on in their lives, what's going right, what's going wrong, and also their priorities. And yes, Grimsby has a unique backstory with everything that's happened with the fishing industry, but it is also a microcosm of the key big national issues that people up and down the country are facing, whether it's the NHS, whether it's levelling up, whether it's the green energy future that this place is staking so much on, or indeed those many, many families who we've spoken to who just feel that they are surviving and not living. They want answers from Starmer and Sunak when they get into town next week. They will be taking part in in-depth interviews and also the chance to be grilled directly by people from Grimsby and Cleethorpes and further afield. So it will be a different feeling event to the one in Salford last night. It will be quite a moment in the whole election campaign. It's the first time such a big political event has come to a venue outside of the major cities in the UK. And I think from being here, I know you have been here a fair bit as well, Sophie, this is a town where people tell it like it is. They don't really have much time for politicians who give them flannel. They can call through that very quickly indeed. And they will be watching, waiting and using their voice to tackle the politicians directly this time next week in the Battle for Number 10, live on Sky News.
Yeah, Tom, that's definitely my experience as well. After spending a bit of time in Grimsby, it's definitely going to be worth a watch. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom Parmenter there. Well, let's pick up now with Sky's chief political correspondent, John Craig, shall we? John, we knew that Keir Starmer had agreed to the event already. What are the Conservatives saying?
Well, it was at 5 o'clock this afternoon that the Tories gave us this statement. They said, Rishi Sunak looks forward to taking part in the Sky News Leaders event next week. We hope that Sky will continue to work with the Labour Party to find a way to ensure both leaders are on stage taking questions from the live audience at the same time for at least part of the programme. And we hope that Keir Starmer can find the courage to agree. This would provide the best possible opportunity for voters to see the clear choice at this election. And so, as I've said, the Tories are hoping that they can both take questions at the same time, want to go head to head. I was at Salford last night. The view after that pretty fiery debate was that Mr Sunak would be pretty confident about having the rematch, if you like, Sunak versus Starmer, the rematch, and they would make some sort of statement like this today, and so it's proved. Mr Sunak was pretty combative, and he, as you've said, there was that tax row which was rumbled on today. Sir Keir was a bit sluggish in his response. He didn't really rebut the charge about the 2000 thing. I was saying earlier today that the barrister, the former DPP, Sir Keir, needs to be a bit more Rumpole of the Bailey and a bit less Mark Darcy from the Bridget Jones films. Because, I mean, Sunak really went after him, and clearly the Tories are confident, and that's why they want to take on Sir Keir again.
There you go. Thank you very much indeed. John Craig there at Salford, and I'm sure at Grimsby next week as well. John, thank you very much. Well, just to remind you, that Sky News Leaders event, the battle for number 10, next Wednesday, the 12th of June, with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. It will be in our election target town of Grimsby. So do join us next Wednesday here on Sky News Live from 7 p.m. And you can also apply to join the audience for that event by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Right, let's go on to our big talking point tonight, shall we? And tax, spending, the row that's unfolded after the TV debate last night. And I just want to say, I don't really want to, spend the programme or start the programme talking about that Conservative claim that a Labour government would cost you £2,000 in extra taxes. It's obviously been disputed, not just because it's cumulative rather than annual, but because it's based on an awful lot of assumptions, with some of the conclusions even being disowned by the authors who did the original research. But look, I can see I'm already been sucked down the rabbit hole myself as well now too. There are two reasons I don't want to talk about the £2,000 claim. So the first is because the Conservatives want us to talk about it, because even if we're discussing the fact that the number's being disputed, we're still talking about Labour putting up tax. But the second reason is even more important. The parties are both arguing about whether each other's sums add up. Well, they don't, do they? I mean, both of them are promising they won't raise income tax, national insurance or VAT, 3/5 of the total tax revenue. No one wants to borrow other than to invest. Health, schools, defence, all ring-fenced from spending cuts in some form. I genuinely don't understand how that all adds up. Not even close. Public spending projections after the next election has been described as a fantasy by economists. The tax burden is set to hit a historic high. We're spending more on debt interest payments than on education. So forget about quibbling over a few numbers here and there, because it doesn't seem to me like any party's being honest about just how difficult it's going to be after the election and the kind of choices that the next government is going to have to make, no matter who it turns out to be. First, let's remind you of a flavour of what the PM had to say about that £2,000 figure and Keir Starmer's response.
You want to put everyone's taxes up by £2,000, and this is really important. Yeah. Independent Treasury officials have costed Labour's policies, and they amount to a £2,000 tax rise for every working family.
This £2,000 he keeps saying it's going to cost is absolute garbage. We won't go into the details of it.
Well, the Conservatives repeated the claim today, but Keir Starmer came out swinging. He accused the Prime Minister of lying.
What is absolutely clear is that due to independent analysis, Labour have a £38 billion black hole in their policies. That will lead to £2,000 of extra taxes for every family up and down the United Kingdom. This is underpinned overwhelmingly by HMT analysis, Treasury analysis. So if people think that the Labour Party are going to win this election, they need to start saving.
All of Labour's plans are fully costed, fully funded. They don't involve tax rises for working people. And what you saw last night was a sort of bright light on the character of the Prime Minister, because when his back was against the wall, what did he do? He lied, and he knew he was lying. I don't say that lightly. That's not something I bandish around. He lied about our plans, he lied about the boats, and he lied about waiting lists. And that's why the choice at the next election is even more stark today than it was yesterday.
Well, that was the argument in a nutshell. Earlier, I spoke to the Economics Secretary to the Treasury, Bim Afalame. I did start by talking about the debates. Thank you so much for being on the programme this evening. So Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer both agreeing to take part in Sky's Leaders event in Grimsby next week. You're looking forward to watching?
Well, frankly, after the Prime Minister's performance last night against the poor performance of Keir Starmer, I'm very much looking forward to it. And, you know, I think it'll be a good spectacle and a good event.
How important do you think it is for both leaders to, I guess, put themselves forward for interviews, debates and stuff going forward when people are trying to work out how they should be voting?
Look, of course it's important because this is a big decision, and having been out on the doors in my own constituency in Hitchin and elsewhere, I know that people are still, there are a lot of undecided people. They say, I haven't had a chance to figure out everything yet. I haven't had a chance to see things. Obviously, the manifestos are still to come, and that's part of it. But it's important that both leaders get to interrogate each other's plans as well. And so there are lots of different ways in which this should work. But what I think is wrong is that some people say, oh, these debates don't matter, they're just too shouty, nobody's influenced by them. That is not my experience at all. There are a lot of people in this country who still do not know how they're going to vote, and they are looking very carefully at these debates.
Now, let's talk about one of the things that have come out of yesterday's event, shall we? Because you're obviously hammering this line that a Labour government would put up taxes by £2,000 per household. Now, Nick Davis at the Institute for Government has tweeted today to say a chunk of the £2,000 tax rise Sunak claimed Labour would be implementing is based on my work, he said. And he then went on to describe that claim as nonsense. We know, of course, the Permanent Secretary to the Treasury, James Bowler, has also pushed back to say that it shouldn't just be presented as being costed and produced by the Treasury as well. I mean, is this claim a lie?
No, it's not, and I want to be incredibly clear about this. Of the 27 costings that were included, 21 of them were done by independent civil servants, costing Labour's policies. 3 of them were done by other government departments through responses to written questions and the like, and 2 of them came from the Labour Party themselves. And, you know, this is really sad to see the Labour Party just trying to distract people from what is...
It's not just the Labour Party, is it? This is Nick Davis of the Institute for Government. Well, he says his work has been used by you guys, by the Conservatives, and he says it in a way that is nonsense.
Well, as I said, the vast majority of this was costed by independent civil servants. You mentioned James Bowler, the Treasury Permanent Secretary, who, by the way, having worked with him, I have immense respect for. What all the Permanent Secretary was saying is that the overall £2,000 number, or just over £2,000 number, was not produced by civil servants. The Prime Minister never said that. What we said is that when you bear in mind all of these reasonable costings, most of which were done by independent civil servants, once you bear those costings in mind, with reasonable assumptions, and using the Labour Party's own figures as well, it's over £2,000 per working family. But that is what we say.
The Institute for Government is saying that it's nonsense, and their workings are part of what this figure has come from.
Well, as I said, it's a small part of those work. As I said, 21 of these 27 were done by independent civil servants. So, look, we can nitpick around all of this.
I mean, are civil servants independent? Some people would say that they're not independent, they're working for the government. Well,
they're making independent judgments that they are willing to stand behind, indeed are published on the Treasury's own website.
The Treasury have pushed back to say that they're not willing to stand by this document.
No, what the Perm Secretary has said, rightly, is that no civil servant came up with a £2,000 figure. Of course, that was the Conservative Party analysis, but we drew upon independent analysis. Okay. Also, I must say, there was one of the costings that was done by an independent investment bank, though one of them was done like that. But look, that all of this effort by Labour today to try and rubbish these claims, when Keir Starmer was given the opportunity repeatedly in the debate yesterday, Keir Starmer couldn't say how he was going to fund all of these promises.
We'll talk about this later, but you're saying that a Labour government would put up taxes by £2,000 per household. How much has tax gone up under the Conservatives over the last parliamentary term per household?
Well, it's difficult to calculate because, of course, you know, it's a blended... You know,
well,
you have to think...
I'll give you the answer. Since 2019, according to our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, and analysing OBR figures, taxes has gone up £13,000 per household since 2019. £2,000 sounds like a bit of a bargain in comparison, doesn't it?
Well, what I know is that if you look at the real disposable income, i.e. the amount of money people have at the end of the week, at the end of the month.
No, we're talking about
working.
tax. You're talking about how much tax would go up under Labour. This is really important. I'm not talking about disposable income, I'm talking about tax. This is what you want to base this election on, right? This is why you're talking about Labour's tax plans. Tax went up £13,000 per household and over the last parliamentary term under the Conservatives.
No, I'm afraid I don't recognise that number, frankly, because I've never seen that calculation. What I know is that the real disposable income, the amount of money that actually somebody's left with, which is really the key thing if you're talking about the finances of my household, yours or anybody else's, at the end of the week, the end of the month, is higher, if you compare it, for example, to 2010, over £1,000 higher. That's after inflation, after costs, after the war in Ukraine, after COVID, over £1,000 higher now than it was in 2010. I do not recognise the 13,000 number that you've said.
OK, now, there is a kind of wider point that I want to make here as well. You know, saying that Labour aren't being honest with people about their plans after the election, I feel like, to be completely honest, that claim could be levelled at basically all parties, because at the minute we're spending more in debt interest than education. Public spending projections have been described by some economists as a fantasy after the election. And then we've also got a situation where tax is due to hit a historic high. I mean, it feels to me like no one's being straight about the really difficult choices that are facing people and facing the government after the election.
I don't think that's fair, but let me describe why. You mentioned debt interest. Yes, debt interest is too high. We want to get it down. That's why we've worked so hard to bring down inflation, which is one of the reasons why debt interest costs were high in the first place. That's why it's so important that inflation is now back at just about target level. You mentioned, spending plans in the next Parliament. At the budget, we set out very robust spending plans that are checked by the Office of Budget Responsibility that showed that there was a 1% above inflation increase in public spending. Now, it's a political judgment whether somebody says, well, you should put it up by more than 1%. We've said we can put it up by 1%, increase that, and not borrow more, and not tax more. Labour have refused to do that. So, look, I'm not saying the choices are easy, and I'm not saying that there can't be things happening that in the next Parliament that you can't anticipate now, but it's due on all parties, particularly if you're Labour Party, who are challenging to become, Keir Starmer challenging to become Prime Minister, it is incumbent upon him to be honest about what his plans are. When I knock on doors, so many people say Labour are not honest about what they're planning. And yesterday, when he was given the chance in a debate, repeatedly, by Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer couldn't say so. And all that's happened is today, Labour are panicking because they know how poor the performance was of their leader.
The latest Sky News YouGov poll has put Reform UK within 2 points of the Conservative Party. 2 points. Nigel Farage tweeted to say, we're just getting started. How worried are you about reform?
Honestly, I'm not particularly worried.
You're not worried
about reform.
at all?
No, should I say why?
Yeah.
I'm not worried about reform because they don't have a plan for reforming anything.
Yeah, but you might not agree with them, but an awful lot of people are saying that they're going to vote for reform.
Hold on, I didn't say it was about agreeing or disagreeing. I'm saying that they don't have a plan for anything. Yes, it's easy to shout from the sidelines if you're Nigel Farage or anybody else, to shout and say all of the parties, all of the established parties, they're rubbish. It's easy to do that. They haven't put out a plan for anything. Frankly, at least in the days of UKIP, they actually had a policy. These guys don't even have a policy. And so I am confident, I have a lot of faith in the British people that anybody who's even considering voting reform when it comes to the general election, once they actually take a look at it, they are not going to vote for a party that has no plan, no future, and absolutely no vision for the future of this country. That's what we have in the Conservative Party.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Not at all.
Thank you. My interview there with Treasury Minister Bim Afellamy. Well, let's talk now, shall we, to our data and economics editor, Ed Conway. It was interesting, Bim Afellamy there saying he didn't recognise your analysis. That tends to be what they say when they don't like the answer.
Yeah, and I've heard that I remember hearing that from Gordon Brown years ago. I don't recognise those figures, it's because I don't want to talk about it, basically. But actually, what I was doing, and you'll see the numbers that you were referring to in a moment, what I was doing is basically just the same kind of thought experiment that the Conservatives have done with this £2,000 figure. So shall we? I mean, I can show you how that's worked out.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fair kind of question: is how on earth do you come to this? And the backstory is there was this dossier that the Conservatives came up with just last month called Labour's Tax Rises, and the point is obviously there's no manifestos yet. So in the absence of that, they're going to come up with what they think the policies are going to be, and what they think the policies are going to be works out these bars, okay? So these are the spending numbers each year. It's quite a lot of spending. You're talking about kind of £10 billion or over £10 billion a year. That's the spending numbers, and they've used the civil service to try and work out some of these numbers. And when you kind of break it down, there's stuff you'll recognise in each year. So you're looking at each year going through into the future, and that's the total over there, Sophie. That's the Green Prosperity Plan, so it's quite a big chunk, actually. Those numbers were from Labour press releases and notices. And then you've got, that's the spending bit below the line, money going out, and this is money coming in, so tax rises. And we know something about some of the tax rises that Labour's been talking about. For instance, most famously perhaps, VAT business rates on private school fees. That's a decent chunk of that. But the issue, of course, is that blue bit at the top is smaller than the red bit, meaning you've got spending that we haven't really kind of accounted for. How are you going to cost that out? And that, when you total up all of these bars, you get to that figure there, 38.5 billion. Divide that by the number of households around the country, and lo and behold...
There you have it.
There you have it. See, down there, that's your £2,000. That's how you get to £2,000. And to be honest with you, it's kind of, you know, this is back of envelope sums here. This is not super sophisticated, although they are using the Treasury to work out these numbers.
Yeah, the Treasury thing is interesting, isn't it? Because look, this kind of thing happens all the time in election campaigns, doesn't it really? Let's be honest. But the Treasury's pushed back, haven't they? Which does feel slightly unusual.
I think that's kind of interesting. So actually a lot of governments have done this in the past. Should they? I mean, I think that's a really good kind of debate to have. Gordon Brown did it, I think, back in 2010. But this time around, I mean, the Treasury, perhaps knowing the way things are going, have written this letter. This is from James Bowler, so the Permanent Secretary. And that letter, I'll just kind of zoom in a little bit there.
There we go.
The key bit is there. As you'll expect, civil servants were not involved in the production or presentation of that document, so that dossier, or the calculation of the total figure used. So that's your pushback. But I mean, there is a kind of another thing. This gets to that chart that you were talking to Bim Afalami about. Could Labour have just done the same exercise that the Tories have done on the Tories? And I think if you look at the history going back, so what I've done here is basically I've just taken the increase in the tax burden each year, or actually decrease in the year of COVID, and just divided it by the number of people in the population, by households. Exactly the same thing as the Conservative dossier does. And if you do that and tot up everything here, you get £13,000, exactly that number you were talking to him about. So it is a big increase, and that kind of conforms with the fact that we all know we're paying more taxes, particularly after the pandemic and after the energy price shock. That's a lot of money. And what's interesting to me is that Labour aren't talking about that. They just did their own dossier. So having gone from dossier number 1, now we've got dossier number 2.
I love it, the kind of red books. They try and do this, don't they? It almost looks a little bit more official, the kind of red book
classier. I think the cover of this is slightly classier.
You like the font more,
Well, they've made it look like a budget, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, but then you go into that, and actually, they haven't used civil service numbers. It's even more preposterous, to be honest with you. So this is showing you the bars that Labour thinks the Conservatives will have in the future years. But rather than looking at stuff that they probably are going to do, there's also slightly ridiculous stuff. The Tories have said, you know, they want to scrap national insurance. They're not going to do it in year 1, and yet Labour have put that in there. Work out that bar, and you get to £14,000 per household. So not £2,000, but £14,000 per household. But can I do one more? Because so Labour did that, their dodgy dossier. The Tories were like, OK, we're going to, you know, rather than saying we're stepping back now, they're saying, listen, you know, we can go one bigger than that. So they've got a dossier number 2, or dossier number 3 in this case, another dossier. And they're like, OK, anything that Labour has once upon a time thought maybe we're going to do and mentioned in a press release or wherever it is, let's just tot it up. Let's just add it up. And that's what they've done. And so every single year, this is the Conservatives saying the Labour Party, you're getting to kind of, well, this is per household. And you're including, by the way, kind of weird stuff that no one really thinks the Labour is going to do, like cutting corporation tax to 12.5%. Are they going to do that? No, they're not going to do that, certainly not on day 1. But the Conservative Party have come up with this dossier number 3, and that comes out at 46,000. You know, you're talking about £46,000 per household. So it's just, I mean, it's silly. It's silly.
It's nearly twice the average salary.
It's silly. Exactly. It's tricky because, yes, we're talking about this, and as you said at the start of the programme, the Conservatives want us to be talking about taxes. But we have to kind of analyse the numbers and show how back of an envelope all of this stuff is. And frankly, also, this is just silly, and it's a reductio ad absurdum.
Can I just say how much I love the Conservatives' Hold My Beer? That's amazing. I love it.
It's the only time...
Hold My Beer.
It's like the first time on Sky we've had a title like that.
That's excellent. No, you're right. And look, I do think there's a serious point about how much time we should spend discussing this, but the kind of public service journalism of actually unpicking it and getting to the truth is very important. I mean, is this a case of a plague on all their houses, or do you think someone comes out of this slightly better, slightly worse? What's your kind of take?
I mean, this stuff is very, very silly. I think the Labour numbers, so if you're looking at, you know, which dossier is silliest, well, this is probably silliest, but it's kind of a response to the Labour dossier, which is definitely sillier than the Conservative one.
So it's a bit like kind of two people egging each other on to do more and more ridiculous things.
And it was in exactly that order. Silly dossier, even more silly dossier, crazy, you know, mental dossier, which is this one here. But the Conservative one is more realistic. The £2,000 is more realistic. But it's also based on quite a lot of dodgy assumptions. So I think none of these are totally reliable, but of all of them, that's more reliable than the Labour one. But then the Conservatives had the civil servants to help put it together, which Labour didn't. So back to that point again. Yeah.
Really good to have you on the programme. As always, we love Ed Conway fact-checking. Good to have you on. Coverage of the election is sure to feature heavily in tomorrow's newspapers. Once again, the sillier dossier and even sillier dossiers, I'm sure, as well. That is at 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us were the political journalist Zoe Grunewald and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor Claire Ellicott. Right, let's bring in our guest for this evening, shall we? The broadcaster Nick Ferrari, the former Secretary of State for Scotland, now Managing Director of Arden Strategies, Jim Murphy. Great to have you on the show. I mean, you never have done any of this in your time, would you, Jim? I'm sure.
Well, I've been in these leaders' debates when I was leader of the Scottish Labour Party. They're tough. I think the remarkable thing is we know 25 minutes into the show, and so far the number that the Conservative Party wanted repeated has been used 9 times on this show. So at one level they've got what they wanted. Yes, exactly. They make up a number and we debate it. I'm not going to name the number, but 9 times that number's been named this evening. I think whether this works for the Conservatives, I think relies on one question as to who is most believable. Is it that people believe Sunak's assertion, or is it that they believe Starmer's riposte, which is if the Prime Minister is willing to lie, not about the number, but the claim that civil servants helped write the number, then if Starmer can make that stick to Sunak, that if he lies about this live on television as the Prime Minister, what else is he lying about? And I think wherever public opinion settles on that, will have won this round of this conversation.
Job done for the Conservatives. Brilliant. Yeah, I take you back to the Brexit referendum. Remember a figure, £350 million? And remember the consternation and controversy over that? But it stuck. If you were to go out and stop 10 people in Grimsby High Street and say, what's this £2,000? Rightly or wrongly, and I take on board what Jim says, they say, is it something that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party? Because it has worked. All parties will do it. And I think, and I'd be interested in you because you've done it, as you say, Jim, I think in a way, and I'm not saying that this means it's true, I was surprised that Sir Keir effectively looked like a stunned mullet the first time that Rishi threw that figure out. And I would have thought the first opportunity he got, he needed to wrestle it to the ground and say, this is a pack of cobblers, or say whatever he's going to say. And I think because it took him a while to get there, I think that sort of reinforced. And it was such a contentious point on the radio this morning. You would not believe. And there are people who bought it, and there are people who are furious, and I think Keir could have done more.
I've been in these debates, and look, ideally what Keir would have had is that letter and said, I've got this letter in my pocket, actually, and it would have... But I've been in a debate, actually, where I had 4 such letters, and I put 1 in each pocket, 2 here and 2 in my trouser pocket. And my fear wasn't that I wouldn't be able to
get the wrong one out.
You get your shopping list out.
Throughout the entire debate.
Oh no, that's not right. Look, put that one back in.
White bread.
Throughout the entire debate, I was worried which letter would I bring out. Turns out none of them were needed because my opponents didn't rely on the dodgy start they were wanting to go with. I think really, one of the things for us to reflect on, the 3 of us are quite obsessed about politics.
That's fair.
We are, you are.
Yes, fair.
And the opinion polls this morning, including in The Sun, which I find really interesting, because The Sun chose to publish an opinion poll that it didn't have to, was that Starmer won the debate on likeability and on every other issue. Of course, the immediate poll last evening, I think it was Sky one, was a 51-49 split.
And the YouGov one, the Sky one, said, putting aside what your own politics are, who do you think won? And it came up with a closer figure, which I thought was quite interesting, potentially. So I guess Is there an argument that Keir Starmer does have more to lose, I suppose?
I think probably what you saw was it last summer or the summer before that Mr Sunak debated Liz Truss in those sort of environments. I mean, how many times did they do that? 15, 20? I can't remember. So he's quite comfortable with that. He's done a lot of it. Remember, when Starmer took over the Labour Party, we were all in lockdown. He wasn't actually able to see anybody in. He had to do it via Zoom and all sorts of video addresses. So this is a relatively new development for him. But coming back to what John Craig was saying, this is, of course, the barrister-like skills, the forensic skills. I would say, of the two camps, as they went to their respective corners after the boxing match, I would have thought the blue corner was slightly more up than the red corner, how I viewed it. But that's just on last night. Now we see how you guys go.
I think that was the immediate response from a lot of the pundits. The reaction, though, of the public appears to be significantly different from the pundits. I'm not in any way
I get it.
reducing your point.
I get it.
I also think back to the debate Barack Obama had in 2012, where when he was the incumbent president, and basically did very poorly. He came back in the debate, the next debate, and absolutely nailed it. So these things ebb and flow, and while we all get excited about it, and look, when I was on it, when I was doing it, I got excited.
Hey, but listen,
they don't change an election result unless you knock the other guy out.
But listen to this, my friend. We did this on LBC. The viewers for that last night, 3.8 million. To put that in context, how many watched BGT final on Sunday night? 4.2 million. There was only 400,000 people more watch BGT. That is the appeal of these debates. That's the reality to hold on to. People are absolutely interested, as Jim says.
And I think actually more people will see the debate through social media than so.
Of course,
that's true. It's the clips,
because all these clips.
And also, it could also be the issues that get oxygen in the debate, like the 2,000 pounds.
Oh, you've said number again.
What was that again?
That's the 10th time.
Oh no!
Ideal. They should pay.
Is that the £2,000 one?
We need a ticker at the bottom, don't we? Of like how many times Jim's going to give me a slap on the wrist at the end of this programme.
Product placement.
We'll have lots more from both of you on the programme. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. Could last night's debate mark a turning point for Rishi Sunak? We'll discuss the fallout with a veteran of the TV election debate. Adam Bolton is going to be here. Plus, I'll be speaking to the chef Tom Kerridge about why he's among over 100 business leaders who say they're backing Labour at the election. And after the break, ructions in Wales after the First Minister Vaughan Gething loses a vote of no confidence. We will have the story.
It's extremely worrying because they are quite capable of overwintering. They're found up even in places like Nepal in their natural habitat, so our winters are not a barrier to them. There were a load of nests found last year, and some of them were found quite late in the year, which means new queens will have hatched and gone off and made nests. Each hornet nest could be producing a minimum of 10 queens and maybe up to 100 queens that would be overwintering. So you can see how exponentially they can spread. The individual hornets will fly 25 to 30 miles before setting up a nest. Once they've set up a nest, they will operate within about a half-kilometre radius of where that nest is. But it's very, very worrying that they're here. They're in a part of the UK where we have some of our rarest bees, things like the shrill carder bee, the brown-banded carder bee. Some of their strongholds are in that sort of Thames Gateway area in the sort of Kent and Essex environ, which of course is close to the area where all of those nests have been found. If in doubt, report it, basically. Even if you're not 100% sure, report it. There is a hotline to report them on. You can get an app on your phone to report them. People will come out and investigate. And rather than just sort of kill one, it is better to report it, because what they really need to do is to trace the nest. An individual worker hornet being killed is not going to have any great effect. But if you can find an individual worker hornet and trace it back to where the nest is, then they can destroy the nest before new queens are incubated and able to set up more hornets in the following year. The worrying thing is that possibly the proverbial cat is out of the bag. They have now already successfully bred and overwintered in the UK. It will be catastrophic for bee populations, for pollination within our country. There are no real predators for them over here, so they will do extremely well. Our bees are not used to them, so they will fall easy prey.
Hello, welcome back. The top stories for you. The UK statistic watchdog is looking into Rishi Sunak's claims about Labour's tax plans in last night's TV debates. The First Minister of Wales, Vaughan Gething, has lost a vote of no confidence tabled by the Conservatives. As for the party leaders, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer have taken a break from the campaign trail today. The leaders of both the main parties have attended events to commemorate the anniversary of D-Day. And you can stay up to date with all the political goings-on our Digital Politics Hub by scanning the QR code at the bottom of your screen and around the other stories that we've been covering that you can read about today. This one, Sarah Davey, has been fined for speeding. The Lib Dem leader was caught doing 73 miles an hour in a 60 miles an hour zone on the M1 motorway. And the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, has said that NHS staff will be banned from displaying Palestinian flags at work if the Conservatives win the general election. And you can stay up to date with the election and all the goings-on in politics. There's a lot going on right now. Just scan the QR code on the bottom of your screen. Well, to Wales now, where the First Minister, Vaughan Gething, has lost a no-confidence vote just 3 months into the job. He became emotional as his colleagues paid tribute to him ahead of the vote coming through at the Senedd in Cardiff. But speaking in the last hour, he vowed he would carry on in the role.
Well, obviously, it's a very disappointing afternoon to go into the Senedd for what is a transparent gimmick in the general election, led by the Welsh Conservatives, to go into a position where the ill health in 2 of our members has affected the outcome of the vote. And as I said, on ill health grounds, we have always paired. That means you even up people from one party to another. We did that for more than 3 months with the leader of the Welsh Conservatives. So all the questions about integrity, there are lots of questions about the integrity of other people, where we are. I'm here, proud to be the First Minister of Wales, to serve and lead my country. That's what I've done today. It's what I'll carry on doing.
Well, Sky's West of England and Wales correspondent Dan Whitehead is in Cardiff for us. Dan, just talk us through what's happened.
Well, this has been building for a couple of weeks and months, really. We've got to this point today for 3 main reasons surrounding Vaughan Gething. The real top one is this £200,000 donation, which Vaughan Gething took in his campaign to take over Mark Drakeford. The money came from a company whose owner had had criminal convictions over dumping waste, environmental offences. He faced calls to give the money back, not taken in the first place, not only from the Tories and other opposition parties like Plaid Cymru, but also from members of the Assembly from his own party, Labour, as well. He insisted no rules were broken. On top of that, there was controversy surrounding deleted messages during the COVID pandemic. He actually sacked one of his own ministers when he came in to be First Minister, accusing her of leaking those messages to the press. She denies that. It brought us to today and this motion of no confidence brought by the Welsh Tories. What was really interesting and what Vaughan Gething mentioned is that 2 of the Labour Assembly members were unwell today, and he needed absolutely every member, every backbencher, to be able to vote against this motion. 2 were unwell, couldn't vote, which is why Vaughan Gething lost this. Now, this motion of no confidence isn't binding. He doesn't have to stand down, but of course the optics aren't good and it doesn't look good. The technical fact is that Vaughan Gething no longer has the confidence of the Parliament behind me. What happens next? Well, I was speaking to the Welsh Tory leader. They are now going to go away, speak to Plaid Cymru, speak to the one Lib Dem Assembly member, figure out what to do next. We could look at votes of no confidence in the whole government. I expect a little pause, a bit of reflection now before anything else happens next. The fact of the matter is, of course, that all this comes amid an election, and Keir Starmer and Vaughan Gething accused the Tories here in Wales of playing politics, describing this as a gimmick. But the fact of the matter is there are 4 weeks left of this general election campaign, and tonight Plaid Cymru, the Tories, the Lib Dems are all calling on Vaughan Gething to resign. He's refusing to do so, but the fact that he lost this vote here tonight, it may well be simply because 2 of his own Labour members were unwell, although interestingly one of those who are unwell, we understand, was the minister which he sacked. Read into that what you will, but the fact that that has happened with 4 weeks left to go of campaigning means that what happens in the Senedd here over the next month may continue to have an impact.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Dan Whitehead reporting there from the Senedd. Coming up next on the Politics Hub, I'm going to be joined by the chef Tom Kerridge, and I'll be asking him why he thinks Labour has the recipe for success. See what we did there for British business. Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have been courting business for several years in what's been known in the City of London as the smoked salmon and scrambled eggs offensive. And all those breakfasts have seemingly paid off, because last week more than 120 business leaders signed an open letter saying Labour had shown it had changed and wants to work with business to achieve the UK's full economic potential. We can speak to one of the people who signed that letter, the Michelin-star chef and restaurateur Tom Kerridge, who joins us now. So why did you decide to put your name to the list?
Well, from my point of view, I've been a Labour supporter all of my life. My background, where I grew up, the way in terms of family background, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the Labour Party has always been the one that I felt is politically closest to where I'm from and where I believe. But then also moving forward into business and being a business operator and owner, I firmly feel that, particularly in hospitality, a world that is built on people, the fundamental basics of people's needs in this country, feel that it just doesn't seem to be working at all anywhere. So in terms of a workforce, I believe every business that's built on people and a workforce, you need them to be happy. You need them to be able to thrive and prosper and feel that the education system is right, and feel that the transportation system is right, and feel that they can affordable housing, rentals are right. And, most importantly, I think that the NHS is right? And from years of underinvestment across all of those scenes, I think that you find those fundamental basics for a team of people and a workforce of people. You need those guys to be happy. You need those people to be in a position where they feel that they can thrive. For you as a business operator to be able to operate and move forward.
So with your kind of business hat on then, you say that things just aren't working now. What would be the kind of single thing or the policy that you think would make the most difference to businesses like yours?
I mean, there's so many. I think for the world of hospitality, I mean, we've been, everybody's been under the cosh, and many businesses have been put through the ringer over the last few years regarding the pandemic and then Brexit. I think hospitality has been at the brunt of those, two catastrophic events for us. In terms of an industry, I think the biggest thing was, during the pandemic, I was part of an industry-led campaign of conversation with government at that point. And, the Brexit, the furlough scheme that Chancellor Rishi Sunak at that point put into place was very welcoming, and it worked very, very well. And I had high hopes, actually, of, it's not all anti this government. There has been some positive and forward-thinking processes that happen to help businesses survive. But in terms of long-term strategy, it kind of fell on deaf ears. There were industry leaders that were talking right into front bench cabinet about how the hospitality industry, which affects there's 3 million people that work in hospitality. There's over 5 million people in this country that are in it from the offshoot of it, from fisheries and farming and agriculture and logistics. And, it's a huge, huge industry that affects so many different people, from travel and tourism. But it kind of all fell on deaf ears. And for it to thrive with the cost of living crisis, with the with people coming through the door that is less or spending less, and then in terms of utility bills and the energy costs that are absolutely rising, the back end costs that drop into businesses has been put so much pressure, and you see it constantly. There's already a number of high-profile restaurants and spaces that are closing. We've already seen big-name restaurants that just can't operate anymore. Not closing necessarily with losses, but just don't work anymore. Simon Rimmer, Monica Galetti. We've just had recently announced an amazing Michelin star restaurant called Cornerstone that is having to shut as well, but just because of the ongoing costs that come in the back. And a reduction, when the VAT levels were lowered, it allowed businesses to operate and thrive. We find ourselves with there's an issue regarding staffing numbers and recruitment. There's that middle management of infrastructure where people have left post-pandemic and have not been able to come back through to Brexit and a skills shortage. Visa schemes that don't work for hospitality. They don't operate in the right, correct way. That people look at being transient. They look at moving. We need that kind of freedom to operate. So I think a reduction in VAT would be huge for hospitality. Would allow it to grow. Would allow reinvestment. Would allow to release that pressure that many, many small businesses feel that they're under regarding those utility bills being able to pay. But also then, in terms of wage structure, in terms of reinvestment, in terms of apprenticeship schemes, in terms of creating an environment for the industry to thrive, a reduction in VAT that sits in line with the rest of Europe, anywhere between 8, 10 and 12% across the board would allow, that would be the first thing that I would say.
I am going to squeeze in one last question, if I may, because, it's not every day that I get to speak to a Michelin-starred chef, and I am a terrible cook, right? I am awful. I'm the kind of person who will burn toast, I'm terrible, just ask my family. What's a really easy recipe that I can do to show off to my friends and family with? Any tips?
Yeah, honestly, a really simple one is a baked omelette. Like literally, you do cheese, potatoes, gently poached potatoes, slice them very thinly, mix them with the eggs first, right? So you get this kind of creamy egg mix, put it into a non-stick pan and bake it in the oven. That way, and grated cheese on the top. Anything with grated cheese, you're on to a winner, Sophie.
That sounds delicious. Thank you very much. Job done. Thank you so much for being on the programme, Tom Kerridge. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Right, I'm just making a few notes. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Was last night's debate a turning point for the PM? We'll discuss the fallout.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, 2 days of commemorations have begun to mark the D-Day landings 80 years ago. We'll be live in Normandy to speak to veterans, and we'll speak to the children's author Michael Morpurgo. Plus, Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer get ready to travel to Grimsby for the Sky News Leaders event. We'll have all the details for you. All of that to come and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, last night's TV debate was billed as a make or break for Rishi Sunak. Could the debate finally mark a turning point in the campaign? Well, we can speak now to someone who knows a few things about TV debates and events, our election commentator Adam Bolton. No stranger yourself to the TV debate. Adam's here, of course, with Nick and Jim as well. And Adam, I think there's a pitch that we can show of you. This is 2010, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's only got the back of your head, which is a bit, but this is Adam Bolton, we promise. I love the kind of, I mean, this felt like a really big moment, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a big moment, and last night's debate wasn't a big moment. I mean, the difference is, David Cameron famously said that he thought 2010 sucked the oxygen out of the campaign. Certainly the three debates, each lasting 90 minutes, without audience participation, without ad breaks, and on all channels, were much more influential than what's going to come out of this debate, which anything is going to be one thing, arguing over a number. And that was because there were rules, because the whole thing was structured. I mean, I was thinking about it. I think we had, in 90 minutes, we had 8 questions. So that meant that you had, a good 12 minutes talking about each question. You got some exchange between the leaders. And we didn't have things like, put your hands up on what you did on tax, or, we've just got a message from Gareth Southgate. What do you think of that? So it was actually a serious debate. The rules, I think, helped it be a serious debate. And, as a result, I think it did leave the viewers better informed, which I think is the purpose of having debates. I don't think anyone was particularly better informed by what went on last night. And the fact that they only gave people 45 seconds to talk meant that poor Julie Etchingham had to spend her time watching the clock and intervening rather than actually concentrating on getting them to interact.
Nick, you've done a lot of broadcasting in your time as well. How important do you think these kind of debates or leaders' events are to kind of shaping public opinion?
Well, I think they're important for the broadcasters. But I think, in all honesty, if you go in and you're a Conservative supporter or you're a Labour, most likely you're going to come out. How many people are actually influenced, I think, is a moot point. Exactly what Adam says. What annoyed my listeners this morning, because obviously we discussed it, it's a very live issue, is how often they talked over each other and how they didn't. And I think that 45-second idea was too short. I've probably been speaking for 30 now, and I haven't really got to the point yet.
I'm going to put my buzzer
You're
on my
going to put the buzzer
now.
So I think
Sorry.
I think they need to look at that. And I think, again, if you need to give each subject enough... I mean, they didn't even get to crime, in reality. There were things they didn't even get to, which, again, my listeners were saying, why didn't they talk about... So they're desperately difficult. They are important. How many votes they actually sway, I think, is very, very debatable.
No, I think the issue is whether they engage people and make them go out and vote. And actually, there was a slight bump in turnout in 2010.
I think this is the 5th UK general election we've had these debates. And so far, there hasn't been a debate that impacted the outcome. It impacted the campaign. I agree with Nick back in 2010. But other than that, there are very remarkably few memorable moments. We haven't had the Reagan thing where I won't hold my opponent's youth and inexperience against them.
Microphone and all that,
So there have been. I knew John F. Kennedy. You ain't no Kennedy. You ain't no John Kennedy. So we've not had yet in the short history of these debates a moment that transformed an election. Last night, Sunak needed that, probably.
He did.
He was punchier, he was energetic, but he didn't hit a home run, and that'll be a problem for him.
And I personally think, I heard what you were saying earlier on about the figure and the figures out there. I think the fact that Starmer couldn't react, but the Labour Party managed to react today and produce this letter written before the debate saying that the civil service is not behind these figures, it has given Keir Starmer the licence to use the liar word, which I think, you know, for someone as kind of sober-sided as him to do that is something which resonates with voters.
Interesting stuff. Thanks all very much indeed. Lovely discussion. We'll have lots more from Adam, of course, during the election campaign. That's it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee. So there you go. That's us done for tonight, but I'll see you tomorrow with lots more coverage, of course, from an electric election campaign.